Hi everyone, nice to see you again. Today we'll be addressing a topic of what I hope is mutual interest. Given that this channel is about learning Japanese, given that you are either studying Japanese or thinking of studying it, I think it might be interesting for us to turn our attention to a question that is often not asked, perhaps, in these sorts of contexts. And the question is, should I bother learning or trying to learn Japanese at all? Now, given the type of channel that I have here, you might expect me just to say, yes, by all means learn Japanese, it's wonderful, but that's not what I'm going to do. If I had to formulate one single answer to the question, should I learn Japanese? That answer would be no. No, you should not learn Japanese. Why not? Well, it's too hard, you're going to quit, and realistically speaking, all of the time, effort, energy, heartache, and money you put into it is probably going to end up being wasted. Now you might think, oh well, come on, the process of trying to learn something new is fascinating. We've got to keep our brains active. There's always going to be some sort of payoff when you try and learn something like Japanese. No. In the final analysis, if you want to learn to speak Japanese and you don't end up being able to speak Japanese, that means you failed. That type of failure can really hurt people. It's not a great feeling. People have often built up in their heads, maybe everybody who learns Japanese or tries to learn it has built up in their head this idea, this vision of themselves speaking it, this vision of themselves as being someone who can speak Japanese. When they fail and quit, they realize that they were simply kidding themselves all along. I've been in this kind of situation myself, although I'm not going to talk about that in detail in this video. I will say that it's a pretty poisonous feeling. Save yourself the heartache and do something else with your time. Let's imagine that somebody's just come up to me. They said, Sam, I know that you speak Japanese reasonably well. What do you think? I'm interested. Do you think I should give it a shot? They've said that to me, and I've said to them, no, you shouldn't, and they've walked off. 5 minutes later, they come back. They come back and they say to me, Sam, I've been thinking about what you said, and I'm not sure about it. I think you're wrong. I think I can do this. I'm young. I don't have any other responsibilities. I have a lot of free time. I'm very committed. This is really important to me. I really want to do it. Do you really think it's a bad idea? Now things change a bit. Now you've given me a bit of extra information about yourself. Now I have more to work with. Now we can discuss things from a slightly different perspective. If your approach to language learning is like mine, there are really only two reasonable long-term objectives, two worthwhile long-term objectives. Other people would say that there are other worthwhile objectives you can have, but for me personally, there are only two. Worthwhile objective number one is to try and get to some sort of upper intermediate level. We'll call that B2. That is going to take you, I would say, about 3,000 hours of study if you are respectably talented. I know the idea of being talented is a bit problematic, but we'll come back to it later. Worthwhile objective number two is the idea of getting to some sort of advanced level, C1, let's say. If you're familiar with these CEFR language levels, that would be C1, that's advanced. That's going to take you about 5,000 hours if we stipulate that you have the level of talent, sort of respectable level of talent that I mentioned a moment ago. Other people will of course disagree with these numbers. This is all quite subjective and difficult to quantify, but these are the numbers we're using here. Now, if you do 3 hours of study a day, I'm talking about real study here, real committed study, right? I'm not talking about listening to a podcast while you're chopping onions. If you do 3 hours of committed study a day, then you're going to be doing about 1,200 hours a year. Over 3 years, that's 3,600 hours. Now let's round that all the way down to 3,000, right? So we're doing a little bit less than 3 hours a day. We're doing that for 3 years and we're managing 3,000 hours. You can now expect to have, in my opinion, a pretty strong upper intermediate level of listening comprehension and reading comprehension. You will also have some ability to speak, but how well you speak will depend on lots of other factors. Most obviously, how much practice you've done. Do not expect Japanese to simply flow out of your mouth because you spent a lot of time watching anime. My experience of learning languages tells me that for all of the undoubted and undeniable importance of getting a lot of exposure, learning to actually speak is one of the most difficult, draining, grueling cognitive processes that you can go through as a human being. Bear in mind what's involved in trying to speak foreign language. Firstly, you have to understand that you have basically been stripped of your ability to speak. Being able to speak is one of the most fundamental competencies of an adult human being, and being stripped of it is actually not that much fun, as you will discover, I promise you. Once you're in that state, what is required of you is a constant, grinding, minute attention to detail, and you are required, of course, to try and produce sounds that your brain is not used to hearing and that your vocal apparatus is not used to producing the whole time. This can be very undermining and humiliating. If you persevere with it, you will find a lot of gratification in this process, but you must not expect it to be fun. It's a bad mistake to expect this to be fun. If you're reasonably talented and if you can persevere, then you can expect to make a lot of progress with your speaking. But people vary considerably in how much progress they can expect to make and how quickly. You can't know what sort of person you are in this regard until you try. Sometimes in life we try to learn to do things and we realize that we're just not very good at them. I mean, we've all had experiences like that, right? So if you're reasonably talented and you're willing to keep hammering away at your spoken Japanese, then with 3,000 hours of study, including quite a lot of conversation practice, you may well be able to get to some sort of upper intermediate level of conversational ability. Like I said, that will require a lot of practice. You may well find that you are going to have to fork out your hard-earned cash to obtain the opportunities to get that practice. Please don't believe the hype about free language exchange online, allowing people to become fluent in all these different languages without any effort or cost. You're going to have quite a special personality type, I think, to be able to persevere with these random language exchanges. And meeting up with people in real life to do, again, language exchanges is logistically difficult. It depends on where you live. It depends on the local population breakdown. Obviously, it's not that straightforward. This is where websites like italki come in. This isn't a plug for italki. They're not paying me to say this. You can use any website you like. But these websites are worth their weight in gold, so to speak. Yes, that means you're going to have to pay for your conversation practice, but I would point out that you're already paying to learn this language that you're learning. There's an opportunity cost, of course, to the time you spend learning Japanese. Don't think in terms of trying to do it for free. It's never free. If you have to spend 5,000 hours doing it, of course it's not free. One of the great advantages of working with a teacher, if you can find the right teacher, is that the teacher will give you a lot of feedback. They won't just go, They will tell you when you're doing things right and tell you when you're doing things wrong, and that's really important. They're giving you that feedback for a reason. Broadly speaking, there are two reasons. Reason number one is that what you're saying is incomprehensible. Reason number two is that what you're saying is comprehensible but cruddy. Your grammar's cruddy. Your lexical choices are cruddy. Your pronunciation is cruddy. They're giving you that feedback for a reason, so take it seriously and work with it and try to improve these things. The great wild card in language learning is pronunciation. When people learn foreign languages, their pronunciation, their level of ability to pronounce the foreign language in question doesn't seem to correlate very strongly with their other abilities. There are people with pretty good pronunciation who don't have a particularly good grasp of the grammar of the language or the lexicon of the language, and there are people who are the other way around, who have quite good grammar, who speak quite well in terms of constructing sentences, but who have atrocious pronunciation. It is possible, unfortunately, that you will turn out to be one of these people who has really weird, bad pronunciation in the foreign language you learn, in our case Japanese, and that there's nothing you can do about that you can't shift your weird pronunciation. That happens. That is a risk, and you should understand that you are running that risk when you decide to learn a foreign language. Some people will tell you that pronunciation is not that important. If people can understand you, that's fine. This is a very complex matter that I'm going to discuss in other videos, but having weird pronunciation is a major problem, a major burden in my opinion. It affects people's ability to understand you, it affects how comfortable they feel when they talk to you, and it affects how willing they are to talk to you. Again, you can't know to what extent you're going to have problems with pronunciation until you try. There are lots of highly intelligent people who speak foreign languages with garbage accents. Being generically smart won't help you very much here. It's not that sort of problem, it's some other problem, and that is a very interesting topic in its own right, but we can't do it justice here. If you're prepared to jump over all those hurdles and through all those hoops and bear all those costs and bear all those risks, then getting to an upper intermediate level, a decent B2 level in Japanese, is something that is perfectly achievable, I would say. If you give up before you get to that level, if you peak at a sort of B1 lower intermediate level, then you will not be speaking the language at a level where you can feel remotely comfortable in it. Having said that, there will still be a certain ability to communicate there. There will still be a certain social utility to being able to communicate in the language at that level. Whether it's worth it or not is up to you. I can't decide that for you. That is a purely personal matter. I mentioned above that I was talking about people who are reasonably talented. Language learning talent, like any other type of talent, is unevenly distributed. Some people have more, some people have less. If you're not fairly respectably talented, then unfortunately with Japanese you are going to crash and burn no matter what you do. Not everybody can be a software engineer, not everybody can be a surgeon, not everybody can learn Japanese. Can you tell in advance how much talent you have, how much language learning talent you have? No. Talent is obviously part intelligence and part some sort of language learning X factor that is very difficult to pin down. I've seen lots of people crash and burn with Japanese. I've had people studying it online with me who have crashed and burned. When I was at university many years ago, there were lots and lots of people on my course, on my university degree, who crashed and burned with it. And when I talk about these people who are studying it at university with me, remember these are people who had chosen to study it for 4 years. They had got the necessary grades to get into university to study Japanese, and they still basically got steamrolled by it. And I promise you that once they graduated from university, they forgot the little Japanese that they'd learned in the first place. Studying a language at university is by no means ideal. There's always going to be a focus on the written language rather than the spoken language. And when I was studying, I studied Japanese from 1995 until 1999 at university. The internet barely existed, there was no broadband, it was very difficult to gain access to decent listening material, there was no italki, you couldn't do online lessons, you couldn't do online language exchange. It was definitely in many regards a suboptimal learning environment for something like Japanese, and that explains to some extent why so many people did badly with it. But some of us did well because we were reasonably talented, reasonably smart, and because we were stubborn and we really wanted to learn it and we really persevered through all the difficulties. Now I realise that all sounds pretty gloomy, but it's about to get gloomier. What if somebody comes up to me and says, Sam, I'm 36 years old and I have a real interest in Japanese culture. I think I want to learn Japanese. I've got a full-time job, I'm married, I've got a wife, I've got 2 kids. What do you think? If I'm prepared to squeeze in somehow 3 hours a day for the next 3 years, this should be doable, shouldn't it? Can't I do it? I'm passionate about this, I really want to do it. By your own calculations, I should be able to do it, right? I would say to that sort of person, forget about it. If you're wrong and you can't really manage to do 3 hours a day, then your studies of the Japanese language will turn into an excruciating grind, and you won't be able to see any sort of exit, any sort of off-ramp, and you will eventually quit. If, on the other hand, you can manage to sacrifice 3 hours a day to Japanese, despite the fact that you have a job and wife and kids, it's going to suck all your spare energy and all your spare time up. And I promise you, your wife is going to hate you by the end of it, or your husband if you happen to have a husband. But either way, it's going to suck a lot of the joy and pleasure and satisfaction out of your life. I say that life's too short. I say there are other things that are more important. Spend time with your family, spend time with your kids, spend time with your wife, go on holiday, chill out, go for a drive, go for a meal, relax, do something else. It's not worth it. It's not as important as you think it is. So that's my advice. If you're thinking of studying Japanese, you probably shouldn't. Most people who are interested in Japanese have literally no idea how hard it is or what a grind it is to get good at it. So if you happen to fall into the category of people that I described earlier, the favoured few who can actually commit to Japanese, the time and energy and perhaps money that's necessary, then you can go for it and you'll have a good chance of success. Otherwise, I say it's a bad idea. And I'm not just talking about Japanese, the same would go for any roughly equivalent language, but these are things that we can talk about some other time. So sorry for the gloomy message if you do indeed consider it to be a gloomy message, but I think it's important to tell people the truth. Some people put a lot of time and energy into something that's just not going to work out for them, and it's not going to lead anywhere. And if I could save anybody from ending up in that sort of situation, then I'd quite like to do that. So that's it, folks. Sorry to be so damn miserable about it, but there you go. Thanks for coming by. See you next time. Ciao, ciao.